Hello friend, how are you doing today? My name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch. So I just got home from the thrift store, which is just my favorite. I've got a Rudolph the Reindeer red nose because I've been under the weather with a terrible sinus infection all weekend, but I'm on a high from the thrift store and I'm ready to film this video. It's been a long time coming. I'm sharing my favorite best books that I read in 2019. All 5 of these books that I'm going to share with you have really impacted me in some way or another. When I sat down and was reviewing my 2019, I really had a hard time nailing down favorites. Not because I read so many great books that I couldn't choose, but more that I liked a lot of what I read, but I didn't love a lot of what I read, if that makes sense. So these books really are the ones that have impacted me the most, have made me think the most, the ones that have kind of burrowed into my soul a little bit. So that's why they're the favorites, that's why they're the best. And you know, without further ado, let's just get started. Cheers, friends. Got some coffee. We are ready to go. So none of these are in any particular order until the last one. The last one is definitely maybe my favorite book that I've ever read. Ever. That's saying a lot, but it just might be. So have to stick around for that. I did share some honorable mentions in another video that I posted a couple weeks ago, which I will put in the cards above just in case you missed it. I shared some really great books over there, so I definitely think you should go check it out if you haven't yet. So the first book that I would like to share with you guys is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, a story of justice and redemption. And I think this is probably going to get a little resurgence of hype because the movie is coming out, which I'm very excited to see how they turn this nonfiction book into a movie. But I'm so glad that it's getting that mainstream attention. This is a very popular book in and of itself, but I definitely think adding the cinematic flair to it will definitely continue to add to the popularity, and I think that that's great because I think everyone should have to read this book. This book is all about Bryan Stevenson, who was a lawyer and has spent his whole career seeking justice for those who have been wrongly convicted or been over convicted. Is that a term? Who have been sentenced way over the crimes that they have committed. So we're looking at different case studies of the people that Bryan Stevenson and his organization have worked with, but we're also following one case throughout the whole book, a case of disgusting and horrible injustice that happened to this one gentleman, things that you will read, and at least for myself, I was shocked. I was shocked that this case ever got to the point that it did, and so incredibly grateful for Bryan Stevenson and his willingness to work for and with these people. I think this book will make you angry in all of the ways that it should, but it also doesn't just leave you feeling hopeless, but does give you a bloom of hope that there is a chance to change our judicial system, and there is an opportunity in a way that we could have a more merciful and a more redemptive judicial system. I just love Bryan Stevenson's writing. I loved who he is as a person. He's just so wonderful. This book is so wonderful and so moving and so powerful. I will say, as someone who works, I'm not a lawyer and I don't work with people who have been wrongly convicted, but I do a social services type of job, and I would consider what he's doing a social services type of job. And I know how incredibly exhausting and draining it is. And his perseverance and his steadfastness to the people that he's working with, I'm about to cry. It just moves me to tears. And it's, I think, a call for anyone who works with people to keep going, that it's worth it. And even though you feel like some days you are just holding on by the bare tips of your fingers, that the impacts that you're making on an individual level matters. It matters so much. And I loved Just Mercy. I tabbed it up. So many good quotes in here. I hope he writes more. Has he written more? Maybe I should look into that. But if he wrote another book, I would definitely read it. I also believe that the story of the man that this follows, he also wrote a book. I believe. And if I'm correct, I will leave this in the video and link that book down below. So I loved this. I think it should be required reading. So good. And it was really readable too. Like, you want to keep reading. It was very readable. It was a hard read because of the subject matter, but it was a very readable read in the fact that you could just sit down and be so engrossed in the stories that he was telling. So good. The next book I would like to talk about is a collection of essays, and it's called My Southern Journey: True Stories from the Heart of the South by Rick Bragg, another nonfiction read. This was a recommendation from Anne Vogel's What Should I Read Next podcast, and I definitely, in my little hiatus from booktube, listened to way more podcasts because it kind of took my booktube watching, and I started listening to the podcast. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this book, but I do enjoy that podcast. It's very popular. I'm sure you heard of it, but if you haven't, go check it out. I listened to this on audio, and I think that's why this book made my top list of this year, because Rick Bragg narrates the audiobook, and he has a true Southern accent, and it made this book feel so enveloping, so atmospheric. I loved it. But I also really loved Rick Bragg's writing. This is a lot of collections of his work from like different magazines and different things that he's written in his life. I think there might be even some excerpts, yeah, that's how you say it, from his books that he's written, and it is published by Southern Living. So yeah, that's a magazine, right? Oh, it's not published by Southern Living, but it's, I don't know, it's somehow affiliated with Southern Living. But yes, he talks all about the South, about food, about football, about his family, about the physical land. It was just so good. There's so many beautiful, quotable things in this book, but just his love for the South, his love for the place, and the way he thinks about the South and all of the things about it is just, it's just beautiful. I feel like I haven't done this book justice because it's so good. It's so good. I will say at the end, like it's broken up into sections. So like, I'll just read the sections. So home, table, place, craft, spirit. And a lot of the spirit is about football, and that got a little repetitive for me. I like football, but I don't like love football, you know. I like my teams that I like. It got to be too much, and it got to like run together a little bit because I didn't care that much about it. So I think I gave it 4.5 stars on Goodreads. But I loved it. I think about some of the essays in here like a lot, and yeah, I think if you're interested in modern Southern writing from a beautiful writer, kind of a funny writer at times, I would definitely recommend this one. One of my favorite essays was about armadillos. It was hilarious. I loved that one. And then there was also an essay in here, which I've looked up online and read multiple times again, about piddling, the art of piddling. So if you don't want to check the whole thing out, I would definitely go look up his Armadillo and the Art of Piddling essays in here. Those were two of my favorite. So I loved this one. I'm gonna own this one. I'm gonna buy this one and put it on my shelves because I loved it, and it would be a good one just to pick up, read an essay. But I ate it all in one chunk through my audiobook, and that was a wonderful way to consume it as well. Next two were library books, so I will insert a picture of them there in here. The first one of those being A Beautiful Mystery by Louise Penny. This is the 8th book in the Armand Gamache series, and probably one of my favorites, which is not usually the camp that I fall in, because this book was not set in Three Pines. It was set in a monastery in kind of the middle of the wilderness in Canada, and usually Three Pines is like why I read these books. So I was shocked that I loved this book so much, but this, I think, is one of her books that has the best standalone plot. There is definitely things going on that tend and attach to the overarching plot that is all 9 books, or the 9 books that I've read up to this point, but this just standalone plot and mystery and atmosphere was so good. It reminded me that Louise Penny just in herself is such a great writer because she created a new world that I wanted to crawl in and live in. This book follows Armand Gamache and Inspector Beauvoir, and they have to go solve a mystery that is they have to go solve a murder of a monk in this monastery in the forest. And it was just atmospheric and beautiful. I came to love some of these monks and the characters that they were. And so yes, I always love Louise Penny, but this is probably one of my favorite books in the whole series. Next, I would like to talk about The Woman Behind the New Deal. I will insert a picture of it here. This is all about the life of Frances Perkins, who was the Secretary of Labor for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I loved this book, mostly because I loved who Frances Perkins was as a person. I was moved by her story. I was moved by her tenacity and her spirit, and it was just wonderful. I picked this up because Elizabeth Warren was talking about Frances Perkins, funnily enough, and I was like, wow, this sounds like an amazing person who I know nothing about. And she is an amazing person that I know nothing about. She was a huge proponent of the New Deal. She was a big reason that we have an 8-hour workday and we have child labor laws and a lot of these programs that have so affected people for generations and generations since Frances Perkins. It is just about her perseverance and her care for people and just about her life, and I loved it. I will say it was written well and compelling. There was a lot of information. I don't typically read a lot of biographies, so that's probably just, it seemed like a lot because I'm not typically a reader of these types of books, but I still loved it. I listened to most of it on audiobook, which I think helped, but Frances Perkins is just someone who I think about her all the time. I think about her contribution to her country and what a patriot she was to the American people and to her country and her love for the country and all of the positive changes that she brought, and I love her. Frances Perkins had petitioned during her high school or college years, I'm not exactly sure, for their class motto to be ye steadfast, which is a quote from the Bible, but it's just something that she lived her life on, and I'm like 90% sure that I'm going to tattoo that on my body. Like, that's how much I love this book, how much Frances Perkins made an imprint on my heart and my soul, and I hope that you take some time to go learn more about Frances Perkins because she's just wonderful. She's so wonderful, and I'm so glad that I picked this book up this year. She's a role model. She more people should know about her and what she's done for our country. So please go learn something about Frances Perkins, even if you don't read this really long biography about her. But I did, and I loved it. Last, but certainly not least, I finally read Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery, and I can tell you that I could not love this book more. I could not, because I love it so much. I did not read this as a child, obviously, since this is my first reading of Anne of Green Gables, but I still feel like Anne came to me at a perfect time in my life. I read this right after my baby Judah was born, pretty soon after my mom left and my husband left to go back to his clinical, and I was all alone with this tiny human that was totally dependent on me. And Anne was just the friend that I needed. This book was just the book that I needed, and I'm, again, getting teary. My goodness, hormones. Okay, getting teary about this book because I love Anne so much. I love Green Gables so much. And I loved this book. I don't know if I can say much more about it because I'm just emotional, but I also read the second book, loved it just as much as I loved this one too. I'm going to continue the series in 2020, and I think I wrote on Goodreads that there are books that you read, and I yearned. I was sad for my younger self because I didn't get to read this because I just wanted to hold Anne and this world and Ellen Montgomery's writing inside of me for a little bit longer, but I'm just so utterly grateful that I've had the opportunity to read this book and to experience it, and Middle Grade March is coming up in March, obviously, and technically I think this first one does count as middle grade, so go read it. You'll love it. If you've read it before and loved it, reread it because it's so good. Yes, this is a book I will be reading with all of my children because I want them to have Anne in their hearts for as long as possible. So Anne of Green Gables, guys. Potentially a new favorite of all favorites. And I'm just so grateful. Also, I love Anne with an E, obviously. But that's how my family spells Anne. My mom's name is Lou Ann. My sister's name is Morgan Ann. And I've always wanted to use the name Anne as a middle name for one of my children if I'm ever blessed with a daughter. And now I will have an even like more reason to love the name Anne. So I just loved it, guys. So yay. Those are all the favorite books from 2019 for me. I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a ton, but the ones that I have just nestled into my heart so deeply. And I'm so glad that I get to carry them with me in 2020 and beyond. So what were some of your favorites? I've watched so many favorites videos, and I'm excited for some others to post them. I'm just like waiting with bated breath. So yay. Favorites they're just so lovely. So thank you guys for sticking around and watching. I hope that you are having a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.